We are now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, welcome everybody to December's formal Health and Wellbeing Board, which is being live streamed. So we'll start with the first item on the agenda is, have we had any apologies for absence, and are there any substitutes nominated, please?
Yes, Chair. Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
My internet, unfortunately, is a bit unstable today.
Yes, we
can you hear me?
fine.
Sorry, you've got apologies from the Chief Exec, Robin Tuddenham, Karen Jackson from Locala, Councillor Tim Swift and Sue Lewis from Together Housing. And I was told Tim Fox will be substituting for Karen Jackson.
Caroline Taylor, please.
Apologies, Chair. I've got an open mind steering group, and the chair has had to drop out, so I'm going to have to leave to join that shortly. But I will stay for as long as I can.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And Lisa?
Just to let you know, Chair, that I'm here for Anna Basford for CHFT.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. And Helen?
I will be staying until 11 o'clock, but my colleague Karen Huntley is on the call and she will be the Health and Wellbeing Board member in the new year.
Wonderful, that's great news. Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for that. Okay, and if I could just remind colleagues to stay on mute when you're not speaking, and please feel free to open your cameras as well when you are speaking and contributing. Okay, that's the first item then. So item number 2, members' interests, to remind members that they need to declare any disclosure, pecuniary interests or other interests they may have in relation to items included on this agenda. So is there anything to disclose? No, that's fine. Admission of the public, item number 3. It's not recommended that public be excluded from the meeting for consideration of the items of business on this agenda. So as you know, we're being streamed live and hopefully the public is showing interest. Item number 4, we have the minutes of the Health and Wellbeing from the 14th of October to be agreed as a correct record and then subsequently signed. So is everybody comfortable with those minutes? Any points of accuracy? Anything that needs changing? Can we have any show of hands just to see if people are happy? Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much, Ian. Very good. Okay, right, question time. So have we had any questions? What's the process, please, Mike, for this? Just given the circumstances.
I'm not aware that we've received any questions this morning, Dr. Cleesby. So unless...
Yeah, and I haven't received any notifications of any questions.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Thank you, Mike. So that takes us swiftly on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Calderdale Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report for 2021. This is pages 13 to 54. It's quite a long and detailed report. So who is going to be presenting initially for this then?
Thank you, Chair. It's Julie Jenkins here, Director of Children and Young People Services. I've also got Julia Caldwell with me, who's the Safeguarding Business Manager. Would you like to introduce yourself, Julia?
Yeah, you just did, Julie. Yeah, for the Adults Board and the Children's Partnership, I manage.
That's lovely, thank you. I think we were going to be joined by a police colleague, but I can't see them on the call this morning. Oh, you're there. Sorry, you didn't have a name on. Do you want to introduce yourself, Mick?
We can't hear you.
Seems to have dropped back out again, Julie, unless that's my internet.
No, I think we have Mick on the call, but we can't hear you just then, Mick.
It's just frozen.
Okay. I can see him moving. He seems to be okay, but something's not quite working.
He's still on mute. It's Superintendent Mick Brown from West Yorkshire Police, who's here on behalf of the partnership to join us for this item. Thank you very much, Chair. We have got a couple of slides to share with the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's an extremely long report. We're not going to take you through the detail, but we are just going to do a couple of slides to assure the Health and Wellbeing Board around the independent scrutiny of the arrangements that we have in the current structure, but also talk through with you today what we're doing around child sexual exploitation. So I'm going to start just sharing with you, what the arrangements are currently in Calderdale for the Children's Safeguarding Partnership. You wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please, Julia. Lovely, thank you. This is just a reminder for the Health and Wellbeing Board what we have in place at the moment. We did have a Safeguarding Children Board, but that became deregulated by the government. So statutorily, we do not have to have a board anymore. We have a partnership instead, and I'm going to take you through this structure chart to explain. In adult services, it is now statutory that there should be a board. So we've kind of just gone vice versa. So children still have a partnership in place. And as you can see there is an executive. And we had a change in 2018. The government asked for a review of safeguarding arrangements in England and how effective they were. And they asked Sir Alan Wood, who was a previous Director of Children's Services, to carry out that review. So he reviewed the arrangements and said there was a big board in place with lots of multi-agency engagement, but what he wanted to see and what's coming to place is much more ownership and grip of the safeguarding agenda by the 3 statutory partners. So as you'll see there, right in the middle there is the Calderdale Safeguarding Children Partnership Executive. And that is chaired by myself as the Statutory Director for Children's Services, by the Chief Superintendent of the Police, Sarah Baker, and by the Child Protection and Children's Lead, Senior Lead for the Clinical Commissioning Group, which is Penny Woodhead. And we chair the partnership and have the day-to-day decision-making, the oversight of what's happening, the communication around serious cases, etc. So we chair that partnership at that level. And we do have the Voice of Young People, which is, as you know, always very strong in Calderdale. And we have young advisors who've been working for the board over many, many years, who go out and do a lot of research, consultation, bring issues to the board for our attention. And there is a section in the report, if you'd like to see more detail of the work of the young advisors, I would recommend that you do read that. Underneath, what you can see is quite a big subgroup structure. Most boards have this to make sure the work is being driven. And when you look at who's leading these boards underneath, you can see there's really good multi-agency engagement, and the chairs of each of those groups join us on the executive. So together we form the executive at a high level. And in terms of engagement politically, myself and Julia have a regular briefing with Councillor Wilkinson, who's on the Health and Wellbeing Board, who retains the statutory political leadership for children's safeguarding arrangements in the borough. So I'm not going to take you through, because you can read all of this, but the learning improvement I am going to touch on shortly, because it is really important that we do learn and continue to train and develop our staff. And as you can see there underneath are all the chairs of those different groups and boards. Just moving on to the right hand side of this presentation, you've got it in your pack. I would recommend that you do click on this framework. The underneath the structure, it says we have independent scrutiny and assurance in place. And it's so wide-ranging and holistic. I'm not going to talk it through, but I would like you to click on it. It's just a standalone document, because what we get asked is, how are you now as an executive making sure you know what's going on and making sure we've got that independent scrutiny of our arrangements, so you know that we're clear what we're doing. And we have got a really well-rounded quality assurance and challenge in place there that you can read. So we take feedback from the performance group, from audits, from staff, etc. So I would suggest that you do have a look at that framework. We're just going to move on to the final slide. I'm going to ask Julia to take you through the work that we've been doing around child exploitation and sexual exploitation in particular. So I'll just hand over to Julia. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Julia. Can I just check, because my internet is unstable, that you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Super. So one of the ways that we look at seeking assurance and independently scrutinising the arrangements in Calderdale is looking at holistic analysis. Some people might know this more as a deep dive, but it's everything we know about a particular topic. So for this topic in particular, child exploitation, we looked at all of the data that we had, all of the statistics, the figures, a breakdown of ethnicity, demographic data, referrals, outcomes for children, young people. We looked at audit findings and what individual case studies were telling us about how well agencies work together in multi-agency partnership, how well they communicated with each other, most importantly, how effectively they safeguarded and promoted wellbeing and improved the outcomes for young people. We interviewed staff, we sought feedback from their managers too about how the processes were working, the policies and procedures, training. We received feedback about what could be done better, as we always do, what could be improved, and also what's working well. We had particular feedback from young people on services that they had received. So they were actual service users who had been through or been victims of or been affected by child exploitation, and also with the wider population of young people through our young advisors about their knowledge, about if they knew what to do, where to go, how to get help, how to be resilient, how to support themselves and safeguard themselves. We also looked at serious case review findings. We'd done you probably will remember Child M serious case review, which was a large serious case review in Calderdale, and we looked at the findings and recommendations from that. So we did look at other things too, research and other serious case reviews from national findings. Altogether then, we managed to build a picture, and this gave us a lot of real strengths, and those are down the left hand side that you can see, about the effective identification. When we asked, people were clear about signs of child exploitation, schools, services who are not specifically safeguarding services were clear about how to identify, how to refer in, and what to do if they were concerned. The multi-agency child exploitation team was seen as a real strength, being co-located, the consistency of the workforce, the way that workforce is supported with supervision, with training, and as a multi-agency team. The effective disruption of perpetrators, which you will have seen through the papers of the men being arrested, historical cases that are going on. And the activity that goes on in school, both from we have animation for younger children, healthy relationships, all the way through to quite targeted support supported by police and the child exploitation team. We looked at training statistics, and it's amazing how many people across the community are trained and have their awareness raised about this. And also we're developing, and it's just been launched, a harmful sexual behaviour pathway, which, as you can imagine, links quite heavily into this issue. We did find some areas for improvement, and they're linked into our next steps. But I just do want to be clear with you that the areas that we found were not things that needed changing immediately or things that we were concerned about. There were actually things that would take it from good practice to outstanding, or there are always things that we can do to improve. So following this report that we've done, and we came up with the good areas of practice and areas for improvement, we sent it all to experts in the field, so a national working group, they're called NWG, who then provided an independent analysis of the work and evidence that we provided. It's quite a large report. And they really assured us that in some cases I might have been a bit too critical, and in some cases that we could have given more praise, actually, and also gave us really helpfully good examples of where this is working in other areas, so we can now look at other areas and see where that's working well, and use the areas for improvement alongside those to match up. Going on from here, then there's West Yorkshire, where they similarly have done a review of child exploitation. They've brought in the Children's Society to do that. We've got further recommendations from there across the West Yorkshire footprint. We do need further evidence. It's really difficult to evidence impact on children and families, as you can imagine. How can you evidence that a training course has meant that the child is not involved in child exploitation? It's really difficult to evidence. So, but more work can be done, and we'll focus more on that. As you know, there are over 100 schools in Calderdale, high schools and college. There's no one representative for all of those autonomous bodies, so we are really looking at how we're strengthening those connections, and we've done a separate piece of work actually on the more holistic support to the education sector, and this will feed in. We are looking at school exclusion, and we'll be looking next year as a bit of a wicked issue, because we know that exclusions is a risk factor for being involved in being groomed, gang activity, knife crime, child exploitation. And finally, we'll be looking across the risk and vulnerability across adolescents ages 12 to 24. So that's our next piece of work, starting tomorrow actually on an audit with regards to that. And the transition to adult, and really focusing on not just is the impact of your service now on that child, what is the impact of your intervention or your multi-agency working on that adult being safe, being kind, being resilient when they're adults. So that really, in a nutshell, is the report, which you're very welcome to have if you would like.
Thanks very much, Julia. We're just open to any questions, comments, or anything anybody would like to raise from the board. Dr. Cleasby.
That's wonderful, Julie and Julia. So yeah, are there any questions, any comments, encouraging words of support or challenge for anything that you've heard or read in the annual report? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been some real tragic cases of abuse of children in the media, obviously, over the past couple of weeks, which have sort of highlighted just how important this work is, I think, and how serious it can be when things go wrong. So I think it's actually quite timely that this has come to the board now. And I think social care teams across the country are feeling quite in the spotlight and under pressure at the moment. And it's, you know, it's the sort of thing you can lose sleep over, sort of whether you could ever have such a case happen in your own authority. But I do think the evidence would show that we are in a strong position in Calderdale in terms of safeguarding and children's social care. And I think the way that our social care teams have worked in partnership with other organisations like schools and health and the police has been really excellent during the pandemic. I think we're also seeing the benefit of setting up the early help hub in Calderdale in terms of that early intervention and the partnership working and signposting families to get, you know, often low level help before things start to escalate. And we've also had a recent front door health check by regional colleagues who came in to look at our MAST and CAP teams, and we received really excellent, strong feedback from that. Following some of the changes that we brought in since the last ILACS inspection to strengthen what we're doing on the front door. And we are expecting another ILACS inspection probably next year, and I think we'll be in a strong position, hopefully, going into that. In terms of the new arrangements for the partnership board, they seem to be working well. I did have the pleasure of meeting Sir Alan Wood a couple of months ago, who sort of designed the new arrangements, and he seemed generally happy with how things were working nationally. I think there are a couple of areas that are sort of a bit ambiguous as to how things are supposed to work, and one of them is the relationship with the lead member. And so when I questioned him on that, I didn't really feel I got a sort of very clear response. And I think things are working differently in different authorities. But as Julie says, we've set up quarterly meetings between myself and Julia so that I can sort of have oversight of what's going on, because obviously I have statutory responsibilities as lead member. And I think it's important that I can provide some sort of, you know, challenge and scrutiny of what's happening and be fully aware of what's going on as well. And I think the other slightly ambiguous area is the involvement of schools, which Julie has touched upon, how we're working with them locally, and they're not one of the 3 strategic partners in the same way that the police, the council and the NHS are, but and I think that's because Sir Alan Wood felt that there was not sort of one local person who could represent all schools in an area, and I can understand that. We've got over 100 schools in Calderdale across a fairly large geographical area. Some are academies, some are community schools, etc. We've got early years, primary, secondary, but I do think they are a very important partner as well, and that we need to make sure they're fully on board and aware of the work that we're doing. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. So we'll maybe take a few comments and then we'll come back to Julie and Julia if needed to wrap up. I don't know if Superintendent, you wanted to share anything from a policing perspective as well?
No, nothing in particular, just my observations is that I've been at this district now for 7 months, and I have a background in child abuse investigations. I have a background in working within safeguarding for 27 years and almost in the police, and I'm being particularly impressed with what I've seen, the strength of the partnership, the strength of support offered, the supportive but also candid approach that is undertaken to make sure that we've got the correct practices and processes in place to protect those most vulnerable within society. So I am now working within Calderdale, but certainly from an outsider looking in for the first few months, particularly impressed with what I've seen.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Any other comments? I just had a question myself about children with learning difficulties and autism. So the lens of the safeguarding that particular vulnerable population. I didn't hear anything in the verbal report or the verbal update. And I can't remember reading anything particularly focused about that population. So is there anything that you can give us any board assurance on regarding safeguard arrangements for our learning difficulties autism population, please?
Shall I just say a few things, Julia? Do you want to come in as well, or?
I've just missed the whole of that question.
It was around children with disabilities and learning disabilities and a particular focus on them.
Yeah, so we recognise them as obviously as a particularly vulnerable group. The way that we operate in the partnership is we have a huge data set looking at specifically children with SEN and disabilities, looking at the journey through the child protection processes. So from early help, the involvement there. We have in the past seen some kind of anomalies between how many children, for instance, are looked after when it comes to having disabilities and how many children in child protection system, which we've raised and which the service has responded really well to about the reasons for why that might be, and we've been assured about that. I think there's probably more work to do. We also work alongside LEADER, it's called, so we operate the Child Death Overview Panel, and when children who have learning disabilities die, there is a LEADER process which we also learn from and take any learning from that into the partnership. Yeah, but there may be more further work that we can do.
Thanks, Julia. Just to add from a child protection operational perspective, we do have a specific team for children with disabilities called the Disabled Children's Team. And they work really closely with the child protection team as well to make sure if there's any safeguarding concerns, because as Julia said, we do know that children with disabilities can not have a strong voice, can be hidden, can be particularly vulnerable to abuse. So we have done a lot of work over the years, making sure the communication skills of using different tools to communicate with children. And if we have children on the child protection plan, the focus of the social worker on that visit is to see the child alone, to talk to them about how life is for them, what's going on at home, using different mechanisms depending on that child's disability and learning needs. But we're really focusing on what is the lived experience like for that child in that family. And it's that being curious. I think everybody on the board knows that we do use systemic practice. And I think looking at the national cases and the learning from that, it is thinking the unthinkable, being curious, digging deeper, making sure you speak to the child on their own, understanding what it's like day to day for them to live in that family and in that household. So we do have a focus from a practice end on vulnerable, but it's a good challenge, Dr. Cleasby, and it's something probably we can take back to, well, we can take back to the executive and have a discussion there around our focus on children with disabilities and whether there's some more work we could do around strengthening that.
Dr. Cleasby, if I may come in, I think that actually the broader issue is looking at the way when we find safeguarding concerns. So, for instance, our children who are maybe in the youth offending, our children who are adolescents who are vulnerable, who are going missing, have learning difficulties. We know that they have learning difficulties with regards to speech and language, and I think we just need to broaden that and extend it out a lot wider. Actually, the young people have developmental needs through growing up, through abuse and neglect.
Thank you very much, Julie. So Councillor Evans and then Neil Smurthwaite, and then we'll come to a close on this particular item, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in this context. I've been reading recently about so-called ghost children who've fallen off the radar during the pandemic, missing from school and that sort of thing. I wonder whether we were confident we didn't have a problem in this particular area. I think it's possibly appropriate to this item on the agenda. Don't know whether anybody would like to comment on that, please. And are we comfortable that we don't have a significant problem in Calderdale in this sense? Thank you.
Yes, I'll comment on that, Councillor Evans. Yeah, we have a number of mechanisms in place with the schools. We do have what we call a safe education meeting every week. This is particularly looking at the pandemic and the impact on schools and attendance and having eyes on vulnerable children. We also have another internal meeting that the Assistant Director for Education, Leslie Bowyer, who you all know, chairs, and it's called the NET. And it's literally a net, a safety net, to look at all of the children who may not be on roll. I think it's the Children's Commissioner, isn't it, who's used the expression ghost children, which we don't like to use because we want to have eyes on all of our children. There has been an increase in children being electively home educated. Some parents have decided to keep their children at home, but we do make sure through the Education Welfare Service that home visits are in place, that the curriculum being taught at home is strong enough and that those children are safe at home. So we're constantly working with the schools to make sure that if a child is not in school, not attending, that somebody's visited the home and making sure that everything's okay. So I would, I don't think we have, and I won't call them ghost children who are missing from sight or whatever you want to call it. We do have pretty strong arrangements in place with the schools to know our children well, to have the net to look at those who may not be on roll and may not be in school and education, what kind of education that they're getting, and try and get them back into some kind of provision.
I think that if I may comment that we can never be assured, just as domestic abuse victims, there will be someone never report. There'll be child exploitation, because the very nature of exploitation and being groomed is that you don't realise that you're being exploited. Similarly, there are parents who do, make every effort to avoid services, and so however much we try and mitigate, and we did a huge piece of work over COVID of targeting under fives that were vulnerable, making sure, as Julie said, about the schools contacting those children that were out of sight, and we continue to look nationally for other areas of trying to resolve this. I think we just need to recognise that it will, Councillor Ashley.
Okay, so we'll just take two final comments then from Neil and then from Karen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. It's point follows on from Councillor Evans. It's really good to see the content of the report, and clearly a lot of effort goes into this area, which is good. It's more a lot of the media speculation is about those that have raised concerns that aren't on registers, and the report is verily those on registered plans, and that's great to see, but it's those, like you say, ghost or slip through the net, that are more worried about, and how we would respond potentially to that sort of, where others will get criticism of those that raise concerns and nothing happens. And is that what you talk about on these people that slip through the net? Are those the sort of people that are refreshed, reviewed, rechecked? Because I think that's my main sort of worry in the current system is those that don't get on a plan, that have visits, but then, unfortunately these accidents sort of happen, don't it? And that would be my only comment. You've answered a lot of it, but it's just whether it's how do we respond to those people that raise concerns, because that seems to be a huge media speculative area at the moment.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, shall I?
Go on, Julie, you start. I'll chip in as well, yeah.
Yeah, Neil, yeah, absolutely. And that is we know from serious case reviews that children who are on child protection plans, there are statutory robust procedures in place. It's actually more children who die or seriously harmed or abused in serious case reviews or child safeguarding practice reviews were not on plans. They were before that or not seen. So we do focus a lot of energy and attention on that. And we've just recently, for instance, you will have seen the national report on the myth of invisible men, and this is the concern about non-accidental injury to babies. So what we did is we looked at every case where concerns had been raised, so either where there'd been previous child protection plans in place for families, or just child protection concerns raised to the front door, but then either they'd been de-escalated or not, no longer any intervention, and they'd gone on to have a second or subsequent child, which we know is a risk factor, and that's where we focus our attention on things like that. So we audited those cases, really good practice. We did find a couple of points that we had to pick up on, which then meant that the services changed how they operate so that there were no gaps and missing elements. But yeah, I absolutely agree, Neil, that is kind of where we focus. So we make sure our procedures, for instance, in West Yorkshire, when children are moving across borders, most people just have, when you're moving across borders, it's at child protection plan level that you need to inform other agencies. We have it at early intervention too in West, and we implemented that from our own learning. So yeah, agreed, and there is more to do. Yeah.
Julie, just to add to that, it's about the strength of what we call the front door. So Councillor Wilkinson mentioned the multi-agency screening team that we have, where the child protection referrals come in, then they flow through to the children's assessment team. And we had Barnsley and somebody from the region come to have a relook at our front door to see how strong those arrangements were. And that grip at the front door, they said was evident. When cases come in, they're looked at in a real timely way, that we make contact with everybody who knows that child and family, the health visitor, etc. And then if it needs to go through to assessment, that we know we are going out and doing those jointly with the police if it's a child protection investigation. So any council needs to make sure its front door arrangements are strong, because that's really where that first point of call is so important to get the right, the right investigative approach, if that's what's required at the time, which is what we're seeing, I think, in some of the national cases about that front door delivery and going out to see the family.
Excellent, Julie. Thank you very much then. So finally, Karen, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a point as to whether we think there are enough checks in place for neurodiverse children. So, children with autism and ADHD who don't have learning disabilities and therefore who don't come under the disabled children's team.
Yeah, children with any additional needs will be picked up through the assessment process, looking at their needs and how we're able then to meet their needs. And we have done a lot of work over the years in terms of children with neurodiversity, with autism, who have difficulties communicating. There is one of our counsellors who particularly champions those children who can't communicate, who haven't got a voice, who may need to use alternative ways of expressing themselves as well, through drawing or some artwork, and making sure we've got some creative ways of getting the child's voice during that process. So yes, we do take that into account during the assessment process, Karen.
Excellent. Okay, and just noting Helen Hunter's comments in the chat box as well there, about there being a real passion for learning and realizing that we're going to make mistakes, but we need to be in a learning mode so that we can continue to improve and safeguard those vulnerable children in society. So we're being asked to, it is for assurance, being asked to welcome and to note the report. Is everybody happy to do that? Excellent, thank you very much. There's a couple of hands still up from Neil and Karen. I don't know if you want to put those digital hands down. Now, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
To all those that contributed. Okay, so item 7 then on the agenda is the Health and Wellbeing Strategy 22 to 27. Sorry.
Dr. Cleesby, we've got the Adult Safeguarding Board as well, which was actually omitted from the agenda by error originally, but sent out, and Marianne Husson is here to present that report.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. You've saved the day for me. Thank you very much. Marianne, where are you?
I'm here. I'm the vulnerable lady.
Right in the middle. Thank you very much. Please.
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure Julia will chip in as required. So I suppose the annual report for the Safeguarding Adults Board for 2020-2021 really reflects for us the significance and consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I suppose whilst the immediate response to COVID, lockdown and social distancing was at the forefront of our minds, the Safeguarding Adult Board remained focused on safeguarding and how partners responded and recognised during this really unusual year. Initially, the Safeguarding Adult Board paused some of the work streams and held extraordinary meetings with the partners to just examine what was happening nationally, regionally, locally in response to the safeguarding issues and our local responses. The Secretariat, staff of Julia's team, continued with our statutory functions really, but that's how we manage business. So really it was about ensuring that locally we were ahead of the game really in terms of how we responded to the challenges of the pandemic, particularly in relation to those the most vulnerable in society that were our concern. There were some specific safeguarding initiatives, so the Everyone In initiative, and also the way that we dealt with safeguarding patients back to care homes from hospitals. So there's some really good work undertaken there. I think in terms of running meetings, etc., and meeting remotely, we were pretty on ball in terms of using technology and moving so we could safely meet. So actually, when I took up my post in November last year, as the previous chair stood down, Jed McManus, my first working day was actually a Safeguarding Adults Board meeting, and it really was business as usual from that point. So a year of two halves really, one with that real focus on the operational response to COVID and making sure we were safeguarding people and gaining that assurance. And then the second half really still working through COVID, but more business as usual in terms of the functions of the board. I think I'm quite proud to say really that there was a real swift and decisive implementation of the protective measures throughout Calderdale, and comparatively speaking, that resulted in fewer deaths in care homes than we would have anticipated in an area of our size. And also there was some tremendous work done in securing additional accommodation for those that would be homeless at the time. So we developed services at the Gathering Place throughout the peak of the pandemic. So that was really positive. We've talked about the importance of learning. I suppose the Vision 2024 gives us a really clear aspiration as a board of the kind of Calderdale that we want to live in and work in and deliver services in. And I suppose for the Safeguarding Adults Board, sort of the resonance with it being a place which is kind and resilient, a place where people can live a full life and where voices can be heard. And I suppose when we looked at our learning through a number of our SARs, which are referenced in the more detailed report, but particularly I think the Burnt Bridges thematic review, that really challenged our thinking about how can we as a system better deliver and protect those in our community, not just those living in care homes, where quite rightly our focus has been for many years, but actually to maintain that focus, but to broaden it to those vulnerable people living in their own homes, and sadly those living street-based lives. So that's been a real challenge to us, in an area where we've developed a great deal of learning and have changed the way as a system that we respond to some of those vulnerable people. I suppose moving forward, as we continue to live through that period of sustained austerity, we need to focus on the links between poverty, austerity and safeguarding, and make sure any work that we do as a board reduces rather than exacerbates any inequalities across Calderdale. So I suppose that is more working at that local level in partnership, not just pan Calderdale. Looking at the future of the Safeguarding Adults Board, so the way that we move in the next year and beyond, without going through all of those issues, there's some clear areas where we are focusing our efforts, and that's ensuring that we focus on making every adult matter. So thinking about things like that advanced trauma-informed practice. We have an aspiration across West Yorkshire to be trauma-informed in how we deliver and how we respond to people. So rather than asking people to repeat their stories lots of times, but actually understanding how those adverse childhood experiences, how those multiple complex needs, how those traumas throughout adult life have led people to be in the vulnerable position that they are, and make sure that we deal with them in a holistic way as a system rather than just treating one symptom. So if I were to give the analogy that somebody presents to A&E with a broken arm and a broken leg, we don't say, well, actually, we can treat your broken leg, but I'm afraid you're going to have to live with your broken arm, which has happened, I suppose, in the past, as we've seen people as a list of symptoms rather than treating them as a whole person. So that's where one of the key focuses for us. Continue to look at our multi-agency safeguarding work and our thresholds, learn from cases where things haven't gone so well, but also learn from the strength in some of the cases, the good work that's undertaken, and try and do more of that. I've talked about the thematic review a little bit, but again, at number 8, whilst the review was commissioned by the Safeguarding Adults Board and we developed the recommendations and the action plan, we appreciate that actually we are only a bit player in this. This is a massive system change for Calderdale, and I suppose it's working with those other strategic partnerships, working with Cabinet, working with the community to actually ensure that we work through those recommendations and really improve the way that the system responds. Looking forward also, I suppose it's happened now, but it hadn't happened when we wrote this report, was we were looking forward towards a peer review of how the board operates. Again, that has happened, that has taken place. So as we move forward through this year and into next year, it will be looking at how we can further strengthen the work of the SAB. I think it's fair to say that we've got really good feedback on how we operate, but a few areas where we've asked for further challenge to strengthen, how we really hear the voice of the vulnerable adult, and actually how we really ensure that work is making a difference in their lives. And that everybody is aware of what our role is, what our strategy is, and what our ambitions are for improving the life experience of adults across Calderdale. So I suppose that's a potted history through the last 12 months, but happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marianne. So are there any questions? Please, Ian.
I think it's not a question, it's probably just to build on what Marianne has said. I think Marianne's had the probably most difficult first year as a chair, because she stepped into a virtual world, into the chair role, and I think has really guided the Safeguarding Board into the position it's in. Just a quick kind of reflection on the peer review, because not everybody will be familiar what the peer review process undertakes. So it uses a framework that's been established by the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services and the Local Government Association, and a team, and our team was 6 people led by a director from another authority, and they were in the borough for 2.5 days. They look at a lot of information in advance. So there's a level of external scrutiny that the board has gone through. Although it didn't affect this annual report, I think it's really important that we understand what that role is. What you'll also note from the earlier presentation on the Children's Partnership is the slide that looked at the infrastructure that supports both the partnership and the board. There are a number of joint functions that we share. So there's a lot of learning across both adults and children's, particularly the learning network and also the comms and engagement network. So there's an ability to learn across from adults and children's and vice versa. So there's a statutory requirement, which is a very strange reversal from the adults and children's world. For many years, adults were a partnership but not a statutory board, and children's were a statutory board and not a partnership, and it's kind of completely reversed. There is a statutory requirement that this report comes to Health and Wellbeing Board and also goes to scrutiny in order that we can fulfil that statutory responsibility. So I hope the Health and Wellbeing Board welcomes the report and notes it.
I'm sure we're within due course, Ian, but we'll move to Helen next, please.
Again, more a comment than a question. I think that seeing both of these reports is really reassuring in terms of understanding the approach that Calderdale as a place is taking to ensuring the safety of children and adults who are vulnerable in our communities. And I think it's really, really positive is the way in which that part of our system is working. The thing I just wanted to pull out is that we've set we're setting an objective in our joint health and wellbeing strategy for working age adults that is around mental wellbeing and reduction of suicide. And I think that there's a really important link between the work that is being articulated around making every adult matter, around this sort of much more respectful way of considering people who have experienced trauma as people who are vulnerable. So I just think that there's something that's really significant for us about making sure that that strategic objective from the health and wellbeing strategy feeds into the work that the Safeguarding Adults Board is doing, and that there's that really clear link between the two things.
I agree entirely, Helen. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll take those then as the final comments on the report. And just before we move on to welcoming and noting it, I'll take Councillor Evans first then before I say a couple of words.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, late hand up there. From this report, very interesting, fascinating stuff. And there's an increased incidence of street-based living, possibly resulting from the poverty, austerity and safeguarding issues running on from that. And there is a need to reduce the inequalities associated with that. Has this led to an increased street-based living situation for Calderdale? And if so, do we know those levels, and how are we reacting to those? And following on from the Burnt Bridges review, one of the things which struck me particularly about that, and I think was highlighted in the review, was the fact that the problems were exacerbated by a lack of coordination between the different organisations involved there. Have we made a positive move to overcome that and to work better together as all the individual organisations, which are clearly doing good work, but I think one of the underlying problems was that they weren't working together on that. So I think I would like some confidence in that we've moved forward on that one. Thank you.
Shall I go first,
Yes, please.
Marianne? Yeah. So I've been in this role, I think, about 9 or so years for children and adults. I've done many reviews, serious case reviews, safeguarding adult reviews, and this thematic review has been the biggest driver of change across the multi-agency partnership than all other reports and reviews combined. So the change that this has engendered, to exactly what you're saying, Councillor Evans, in that multi-agency approach, in not drawing the lines and boundaries of this is my role and responsibility, and that's where it ends, of actually the examples that I see coming through on a weekly basis now from Neve Cullen, from service managers, from people in the field who are saying that the people's lives are being changed because of the report, because of the recommendations, and the culture chain that people have to be kind and resilient. So the first part of the question is absolutely, there is still more work to be done. It's really not easy. You know, if it was easy, it'd be done now. It's not easy. There's a lot to work through. We will be challenging and questioning the experts by experience. So we'll be actually going out to people who maybe are living on the street sofa surfing or have previously, and asking what change it has made to their lives. So we will be doing that in a few months. We can report back the findings from that. With regards to the numbers, because the numbers of people who are homeless are, you have to be lying down with a sleeping bag in the street when somebody sees you to be counted. The numbers are so low that we just can't count on them as true and accurate figures. Those are being changed now, and that guidance around how we count. So we will have more of an accurate reflection, but it's simply formally not possible to tell that, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Julia. Okay.
Can I just jump in as well, just to add to that?
Marianne, yes, please.
I mean, I think it is important to note that whilst nationally there was an increase in people living street-based lives or homeless, and Julia's already talked about how problematic the way of actually counting people was. Calderdale didn't have a particularly large number compared to a lot of other places. However, I think those 5 deaths within that short period of time really challenged us as an area, a place that thinks that, you know, we want to be known for being a kind place, a place where our people are resilient, and I think it really challenged that culture that we all have for Calderdale. So I think that's the first point. I don't think it's because we had a tsunami of people that were homeless. I don't think that's the case, but I think we felt that it was an area that we could do better and should do better. So that's the first point. Julie's already talked about the massive change that this review has delivered already. But just really practically speaking, we now have eyes on those people, that cohort of people. We've got people going out, outreach workers that are working with them, making sure that they're getting the help and the support that they need, finding accommodation for them. So there are people with eyes on a daily basis. That's the first point. The second point is we've massively improved our accommodation offer to these people. We talked about the Everyone initiative. So there was some government funding to get people into safe places rather than on the streets because of COVID. But actually we've been able to develop specific single room property in Calderdale where people can still live, even if they are using drugs and misusing alcohol, which has been a key bar really for people to get proper housing. And we've also working with our partners, including private landlords, to actually develop accommodation across Calderdale. So there's some real practical things that have massively improved over the last 18 months really now, but certainly over the period of this. And I'm sure that the details around the impact that this review has made will feature heavily in next year's report, because it's still very, very much ongoing. So yes, some assurance there, more that we can do, but actually this has really galvanised some excellent multi-agency work at a strategic level, but actually that multidisciplinary teamwork at an individual level with these people. So just that reassurance for you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. That's great. So Debs, you had your hand up briefly and it went back down. Is it okay? That's fine. Okay, so final comments then from Ian.
Just to build on Marianne's comments and to address Councillor Evans's concerns, alongside the publication of Burnt Bridges, Cabinet also approved the Homelessness Strategy, which sets the kind of framework for a lot of the work that's been referenced. And we have committed as a partnership to have a multidisciplinary team around this group of people, and that is making the real difference. And you're seeing that organisations are committed to that process and very much focused on making the experience and lived experience of every individual be in view and make hopefully for very different outcomes for those people. So I think it's been one of the most significant pieces of safeguarding work, but I think it has really shifted practice, and the fact that we're having, daily eyes on people, weekly multidisciplinary team meetings wrapped around this cohort of people, I think means that we will be able to support those. That's not to say that we'll eradicate some of those inequalities completely, because some of those are structural, but I think we're in a better, stronger place. And I think we can start to see a connection between our safeguarding approach, operational practice, and the policy framework by how we will respond to people.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. So are we happy to welcome and to note the report then? That's excellent. Thank you very much. Now, I believe, Helen, you said that you need to leave quite shortly. And I think that this, as you mentioned, this might be your last meeting with us on the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I believe you've been a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board for a number of years. I'm not quite sure when you first joined us, but certainly you've been an extremely valued colleague, co-worker on this board. Your contributions have always been excellent, holistic, rounded. You've led a number of workshops, and you've really championed the voice of the patient and the public, and always centered our thoughts on not on our structures, but actually what are we here to be doing and delivering for the people of Calderdale. So we're going to be very, very sorry actually to see you go. I'm sure that we'll still be in touch with you in different ways in the future, and I wish you every success in your future role. It does look very exciting. You did mention earlier on that your successor is with us. Now I've forgotten. Sorry, could you kindly reintroduce? Is Karen? Yes, Karen, you're waving.
Yes, it's me.
You're down in the Peace Hall there already, are you?
Yes, I am.
Getting ready for your work. Yeah, that's fantastic. So very warm welcome to Karen as well, of course. Helen, did you want to say a couple of words?
I just want to say a massive thank you. I was going to say, I feel like working in Calderdale is a real privilege. I think it's a great place to be involved in the health and care system, and it's been a place that's really paid attention to what the public experiences, what they think, and allows that to shape and mould the way in which they work. So I'd be very sad to be moving away from Calderdale, whilst excited to take on a new opportunity. So thank you ever so much for always being so welcoming.
Thank you very much. I believe it's some kind of national role. I haven't seen the full detail, but anyway, don't forget Calderdale when you go to those high places. Put in a good word for us, please. Wonderful. Okay, so let's go on to the next item then. Hopefully I'm getting this right now. Sorry for the omissions on the last one. So the Health and Wellbeing Strategy. This is now, I think, pages 77 to 98, and this is for the next 5 years. So it's going to be Debs Hawkins, I'm sure, leading this. Thank you, Debs.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm conscious that members of the Health and Wellbeing Board have been actively involved in the development of this strategy. So and I'm also conscious of time, Dr. Cleesby as well. So what we'll do is just really briefly go through the highlights in just a few minutes. Just a bit of a reminder that the board decided in the summer that we wanted to refresh the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, really focusing on recovery from COVID-19, really focusing on a smaller number of priorities, the priority outcomes that we can really make a difference with. Georgina's just going to really quickly, you've got in the pack, you've got a sort of a presentation that goes through the process, and you've got the actual draft strategy as well. And what we're asking you to do, Georgina's just going to quickly go through the process that we've been through and just like the key outcomes and ways of working. But what we want to do today is we want to ask for final comments and hopefully endorsement of the draft strategy that's there. So I'll hand over to Georgina.
Thank you.
Hi, yes. June, it was agreed that a refresh of the Health and Wellbeing Strategy was required. And then in September, an informal meeting, we had a really excellent workshop, which most of the people here contributed to. So thank you very much. Where we managed to look through kind of short lists for the 4 kind of life stages and amazing amount of consensus agreed a single outcome for each of the life stages. So that was a really excellent workshop. And then since then, we've been back sort of October and November, and got your thoughts around how it should be delivered using a kind of system leadership approach, and how we really make it lived and breathed, if you like. That's not very good English, but you know, what everyone's roles are, how we really make this happen, and how we really make the community understand the difference that it's making, and can see it. So that all your brilliant thoughts on that has really set the scene for the foundations for how we're planning to deliver it going forwards. And we've been doing quite a lot of work around how that is delivered. So that's it really. So back to you, Debs.
So yeah, so as you can see from the documents, and just a really brief reminder, the board identified 4 priority outcomes, 1 for each life stage. So for children, and for starting well, children being, the most important thing actually I've not said, apologies, it's almost like the strap line, the overall ambition is really that people have health and well-being that's good enough to enable them to live that larger life that we set out in our vision. And then in order to achieve that, we've identified 4 outcomes as a board, 1 for each life course, for stage of the life course. Starting well is children are ready for school. Developing well is every 15-year-old has aspiration and hope. Living and working well is focusing on working age people having good emotional health and well-being and fewer suicides, as Helen's already mentioned. And aging well, the outcome is older people have strong social networks and live in vibrant communities. And the board has also identified 4 ways of working. The first one is around joining up services to change lives for the better, with a real focus on outcomes. The second is around focusing on prevention, so shifting more of our focus towards enabling people to be well and preventing ill health. The third way of working is around addressing inequalities, and actually some of the measures, some of the way we'll know whether we've been successful. We'll actually focus on narrowing the gap, particularly, for example, in school readiness. So we really want to focus on narrowing that gap and focusing on the root causes of ill health. And finally, and most importantly, really focusing on how we empower communities and develop resilient communities. So that's really about enabling communities to play their part in creating health and well-being and making the most of the assets in our community. So that's ultimately the framework, as you know, for the strategy. And the next steps following the strategy being endorsed is for us to either develop or align 4 alliances, 1 for each stage, or partnerships, 1 for each stage of the life course. And we're really not starting from the beginning. So we already have a fantastic Starting Well board that's already got a fantastic work programme. And we have we've just started and just met for the first time through our Aging Well alliance as well. So the idea is that we with those partnerships develop those high-level delivery plans to deliver the strategy, and we work in that system leadership approach that Georgine has mentioned. I'm gonna stop there, Dr. Cleesby, and really the purpose of this item is really to have discussion about the document, the draft strategy that you've got in front of you, and any final comments, hopefully, and before we endorse it.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Debs. So yeah, are there any questions, any comments about the strategy? We've seen it in development through various workshops, etc. So it's all well familiar to us. It's a 5-year strategy, and it's really about endorsing and then agreeing the approach and the next step. So please, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, clearly the system leadership approach is what is required, and certainly the 4 key elements that are indicated there are absolutely relevant. I suppose I have a bit of a phobia about timescales on things in order to effectively scrutinise. And I note with pleasure that the Starting Well board is already in place. I'm very much aware of it. The other 3 items are not yet. Do we have a timescale for these by which you hope for them to become effective? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll just take in. Are there any other questions or comments before we come back to Deb's? I'm not seeing any at the moment. So just on the timescale for the structures that need to come underneath the strategy and support it, Debs.
Yeah, I think just to reassure Councillor Evans, the Ageing Well Alliance has met for the first time and has been established. And as you'll be aware, it's really taking that leadership on for the work on Calderdale as an age-friendly borough, and will take responsibility for this strand, this priority outcome. So that's great. That had a really good meeting for its first meeting. And what we've done is the health and wellbeing. We've developed a sort of a project mandate with some things that we're asking each of those alliances to think about and consider. The 2 partnerships that don't exist yet, we've got lots of partnerships looking at developing well and living and working well. So the idea is that the process will be that we'll start. We wanted to make sure that the board was happy with the strategy, but we want to use the first quarter of the next calendar year. So January, February, March of next year to align the existing partnerships in place and work with those stakeholders to identify how those partnerships might want to come together, whether they want to come together and how they want to operate. And I think in line with that sort of system leadership approach, Councillor Evans, that we're talking about, it's really important that those people who are actually delivering the work for children and young people and for working age adults, they'll really lead and able to bring and establish those alliances and or partnerships and think about how they need to work, because they're the experts. But the idea would be that we'd have a high-level delivery plan ready for moving into the new financial year from the beginning of April for each of the 4 alliances.
Excellent, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, can I just say that hopefully we will be able to come back to us and update us on that progress at a future meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely. I would hope that it's probably be a standing item on most of the agendas throughout the course of the year and the next 5 years, updates on various aspects and elements. So as well as the alliances, one would hope that each partner organisation of the Health and Wellbeing Board will continue to champion, discuss it in their various structures and meetings so that it's then also disseminated and everybody becomes aware of it and how we can support it as well. So with that in mind, are we happy to endorse and support the approach, the development of the alliances, and then a future update on progress against that, and of course all the trajectories, the milestones that are mentioned for each of the 4 life courses? Excellent. And also maybe how we mention it wider than Calderdale as well within the ICS, within the West Yorkshire system, because as well as there being a West Yorkshire strategy, we think ours is the one with the process of and the principle of subsidiarity. This is the one that we are really working towards, isn't it, in place? That's wonderful. Please, Mike, finally.
Just to check, Chair, I mean, this is a requirement of the Health and Wellbeing Board to adopt a wellbeing strategy. So I think we should sort of formally adopt it and just get that wording into the decision.
Into the minutes, that's fine. So yeah, happy to adopt formally. I think the support's there. That's wonderful. Yeah, we got raised hands for that. That's wonderful. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Debs. Next item on the agenda is the Emotional Health and Wellbeing for Children and Young People Strategic Plan 2021. This is pages 99 to 178, I believe. So who is going to be leading this item, please? Who we have a volunteer? Emily?
Hi, yeah, so it's me and Rona Radley, but Rona's just joining the meeting. So if we can just wait a minute, that would be great, thank you.
Okay, we can certainly do that. If she's going to be more than a minute or so, would it be, I would wonder whether we'll be taking any other items. There is just, so we'll take item 11, just as Rona's joining, that's because they're only for information. That's the Better Care Fund Funding for Integration oral report, direct to adults' health and well-being. It's just purely for information. I don't know whether Ian, you wanted to say anything about that? Have I caught you on the hoof? Where's Ian? I think we've lost Ian. So I think he's not on the call, is he? So he can't speak to that, but it is purely for information. And then there's the forward plan for March, which I'm not actually seeing in my pack. I must have got a duff pack, but I can't actually see that in mine. Has anybody got sight of the forward plan for the March meeting? Please, Mike. Would you be able...
It is right at the end of the pack, but very near the end of the pack.
Okay. Yes, right. So it's very small. That's fine. Yeah, got it there. So please, Mike, do you want to just lead us through that?
Those are the items. I think that Debs may want to say something about the pharmaceutical needs assessment under this item.
Thank you. Please do then, Debs.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. One of our responsibilities, one of our requirements as a health and wellbeing board is to ensure that there's a pharmaceutical needs assessment undertaken every 3 years. The requirement was suspended last year it was due last year. It was suspended due to the pandemic. And as we know, the pandemic is still very, very much with us. One of our intelligence specialists from the public health teams across West Yorkshire have been working together and are recommending that we actually work together and pool our resources across West Yorkshire on the development of the pharmaceutical needs assessment. It makes sense in relation to some of the changes to the health and care system, the health system that are happening across West Yorkshire. So each individual area would have its own pharmaceutical needs assessment, but we'd actually be using a common framework and also sharing capacity and skills. Our pharmaceutical, the partnership of pharmaceutical and pharmacies operates at a West Yorkshire level as well. So it really makes sense, I think, it's something the directors of public health are recommending. But I just need your endorsement and you as a board to be comfortable with us taking a slightly different approach this year. We'll have our own. There'll be a Calderdale document, but it'll be developed collaboratively through sort of sharing resources and skills across West Yorkshire.
Thank you, Debs. That sounds very sensible. Are we all happy for that approach to be tried out this year? Yeah, of course, that's great. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll note the forward plan, the items on it. You can see that right at the very bottom. And just very briefly, Ian, sorry, I caught you, I think, wrong-footed you. We were just jump forward to item 11, just a very brief oral report on the BCF funding for integration, which of course this board has to sign off, or the chair does.
Yeah, apologies, I had to take a call, so I wasn't aware of the change in the agenda. So in terms of the Better Care Fund submission, we needed to submit the template and narrative documents in November. It is currently going through an assurance process. It's met the first assurance process, which is a review by the Yorkshire and Humber Quality Assurance team, and the feedback was that it was a strong submission and the narrative was clear. They could see the clear ambition around supporting health and social care and Calderdale Care's ambitions. We're awaiting the national feedback, but we expect that to be coming shortly. We can share the narrative and templates with all board members if that would be useful. But I thought we'd do a more formal report once we've got the formal feedback, in case there's anything that we need to adjust in our plans in order to get formal approval. But everything is looking strong, positive feedback, and hopefully the national feedback will be in a similar vein.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that. So is everybody comfortable with that? Wait for the national feedback and then bring back, just in case there's any adjustments that need to be finally agreed before sign off. That's great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we'll jump back now. I can see that Rona Radley from the CCG has joined us, and we'll come back to item 8 then. So please, it's Rona and Sorry, who was it? Emily?
Emily, yeah.
Very good. Rona and Emily, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks very much, Chair. I'm Rona Radley, for anybody who doesn't know who I am. Rona Radley, I'm Deputy Head of Service Improvement for Community and Acute at the CCG. And I'm here with Emily Kennedy, who's the Programme Support for Children, Young People from the CCG. And we lead on the emotional health and wellbeing for children and young people. So what we've submitted is what was the local transformation plan previously, but is now a strategic plan that's required to be submitted by West Yorkshire Partnership Board. Previously, as I said, we've this report or this strategy has been signed off by Health and Wellbeing Board. So the Health and Wellbeing Board has been accountable to signing this and approving this. Given the changes this year, the request was that West Yorkshire Mental Health, Learning Disability and Acute Partnership took a lead for this. And so the lead they took was that we would, on a West Yorkshire basis, submit a high level response around eating disorders, crisis, transition to adulthood and around neurodevelopmental. So we have participated in that as part of the West Yorkshire Partnership. However, we had already started to pull together as a partnership the strategy using the previous local transformation plan. Partners felt they wanted to keep that strategic level and collate that information so that we had an understanding of the priorities in line with the 5-year forward view for mental health and what's the impact of COVID-19, and to share the local ambitions around improving children and young people's mental health and well-being. So we've continued to collate that. It's not required as a sign-off, but we wanted to share that with the Health and Wellbeing Board so you were aware of the really good collaborative work that's been undertaken in Calderdale. And to note the contents of the strategic plan, as it will be there will be a publication on both the council and the CCG websites. So it was really just to share this with you. There's a briefing report that provides you the information and overview, and then I know it's a long document and there is something about how we look at that going forward in the future to link it in with the health and wellbeing strategy. And our starting well and developing well boards, but we are where we are at this point in time. So it was to share with you, raise your awareness of it, and for you to note the contents.
That's excellent, Rona. Thank you very much indeed. So, yeah, any comments from board members? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think. Please, Julie.
Thanks very much, Dr. Cleasby. Yes, you'll see from the report it did come to children's scrutiny, so some elected members have already had this report. And I know Dr. Caroline Taylor's on the report. I'm not sure whether she's multitasking and also chairing Open Minds Partnership, but clearly she does chair the Open Minds Partnership, and there is a huge commitment to children's mental health and emotional well-being, and there's lots of resources there. I think we've said before, if you look at our Open Minds website, there's a fantastic array of resources for parents, for children and young people, for practitioners around a whole raft and number of areas, and lots of resources there for counselling. And we often get asked by elected members for their constituents around what is available. And I would say, do you have a look at the Open Minds website? I'll drop it into the chat, the link for you. We've really motored on having it there, having it accessible, having counselling available for young people. We know that COVID has had an impact on young people's mental health and resilience. There's quite a lot of investment that's come in from the DFE as well into schools, and I think that's having a really positive impact. So we're doing everything we can to kind of rebuild that confidence, that resilience, reducing the anxiety levels that young people feel, as well as us as adults during the pandemic. But just to say a huge thank you to the Open Minds Partnership and to Dr. Caroline Taylor. It's a real coalition of the willing, with some fabulous work underway as well. We know there are challenges there, and the demand is always going to outstrip what we can supply, but I think it's something that we're very aware of, and what we want to do with our young people is build their resilience and build the family's ability to be able to support their children as well, without coming to us for the more specialist services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. So Darryl Thompson next, please.
Reading this from a Swift point of view, it felt a really healthy and proportionate response, and there's a really lovely message of well-being rather than the immediate assumption of health problems and disorder. And so, I really welcome that as an approach to our young people.
Thank you very much, Darryl. And then Debs, please.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to make exactly the same point. It's really refreshing, isn't it, to see the focus on resilience and well-being in this. Now, I really feel that with the priority outcome that the board has just endorsed around developing well, around 15-year-olds having aspiration and hope, I think there's a real opportunity through that to join up the sort of the physical, social, sexual, risk-taking behaviour, elements of health with emotional health and well-being, so that we've got a really integrated system. Because often, emotional health and well-being isn't isolated from the other elements of people's health, young people's health and well-being. So I think this is fantastic, but I think we're at a platform to develop an even more integrated approach, isn't there, Rona, as we move forward. So I think this is really, really great.
Rhonda, did you want to come back? I mean, I suppose it was rhetorical. It's just one that we're all supporting, of course. Yeah, very good. Any final comments from anybody else? Caroline, Dr. Taylor, do you want to say anything from your perspective, clinical lead at the CCG?
Really, just that this is a piece of, well, it's a program of work that's it makes me very proud to be part of, because it is fantastic to be working with so many individuals who do put children and young people right at the heart of everything that we do. And I think the everything we're doing is reflecting that. And as Deb says, all we're doing at the moment is just building and building and building on that positive start. Well, it's not even a start. We've made a very positive contribution already to what's going on, and I think that will be only going from strength to strength. And the more support we get from everybody around in Calderdale, then the better that will be.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And definitely, as a sort of frontline practitioner on another part of my job, you definitely feel there's much better access, much better assessments happening, much more open. It's an open mind partnership. It's not the previous terminology and the previous names for the services was all quite negative, and it's very different now. There's a website, there's universal referrals in from all sources. It's just a completely different world, and really a success story, I think, for Calderdale. So congratulations to everybody that's been involved with that. There are, of course, there's a distance to traverse still. We haven't finished the work, but the recommendations are there to note the content of the strategic plan, note the contribution made by the Open Minds Partnership, and then support the key points and future ambitions provided therein. So is everybody happy to support this? Excellent. Thank you very much to everybody for that then. Okay, a couple more items. So we're not doing too bad for time. I thought we were going over, but we've got item number 9, which is the Calderdale, Kirkley's, Wakefield and Barnsley at Transforming Care Partnership Strategy. Commissioning and Planning Manager from the Council. This is pages 179 to 216 in the pack. So who's going to speak to this, please?
Hi, Dr. Cleesby, it's Karen Midgley. I'll be speaking to this item. Hi. Okay, so we've brought the refreshed strategy for Calderdale, Kirkley's, Wakefield and Barnsley Transforming Care Partnership Board to the Health and Wellbeing Board, along with an overview report for the board. And it's a request for the board to sign off the strategy both at a regional level and our local approach, which I've outlined in the overview report. I'll just give you a little bit of background and the current position. I won't go through the full report. Okay, so the Calderdale, Kirkley's, Wakefield and Barnsley Transforming Care Strategy Group were formed in 2015. The focus of the group is reshaping the market for people with a learning disability and autism, transforming community provision and substantially reducing the need for inpatient care. Transforming Care Partnership Boards were formed as a result of some inquiries into hospital treatment of people with a learning disability, particularly Winterbourne View, if people remember back to that time. So the success of the board is that we have restricted the use of ATUs, assessment and treatment units, to essential care. And anyone who goes into an assessment and treatment unit now goes in with a plan to exit that unit, and there's close monitoring and oversight. And we have reduced our numbers of people substantially on the Calderdale and the Calderdale, Kirkley's, Wakefield and Barnsley level. I think we currently have 4 people who are undergoing active assessment and treatment, but they are regularly reviewed. At a local level, we've made a lot of progress since transforming care. Developments have included an integrated community service that offers intensive support. So our health service has been really strengthened to support people in their own homes and communities and prevent hospital admissions. We've developed community housing both on a local level and as a partnership. And we've recently launched a safe space provision, which is for people who reach a level of crisis, and they're supported in the community. It's within an existing respite provision, but it's a safe space so that they can get that intensive support away from the point of crisis and hopefully prevent a hospital admission. We've also developed a dynamic risk register at a local level, and we keep close oversight of anyone who is in hospital or is at risk of going into hospital, and they receive a care and treatment review on a regular basis. So the aim of the 2021 to 2024 strategy is to build on this approach and work in a consistent way across the partnership, to focus again on a better start for children and young people, people with autism, a focus on community provision, ensuring that we've got quality. We improve health and embed the health checks for people with a learning disability, and we look at employment opportunities and the workforce. Our plan is monitored at a regional level by the ICS Transforming Care Board, which overarches the local Transforming Care Boards, and we fill in a milestone tracker for that. Underpinning the strategy, we do have a local action group, and we're developing our own local action plan. And that's a multi-agency group, including a strong voice of people with a learning disability through our own user-led organisation, Lead the Way. And we also have regular provider forums and share and learn events so that we can share the strategy and make sure providers are on board. We've shared the strategy with our local self-advocates, and they have endorsed the strategy, excuse me, and are very complimentary about the progress that we've made locally, working as a partnership, including people with a learning disability as key stakeholders. The strategy is currently in a PowerPoint version, but an easy read strategy will be developed, and there'll be a strategy that will be put on the websites of the local authority and CCG once it's endorsed.
Excellent. Once it's endorsed, I'm sure it will be. Okay, any questions then for Karen? Please, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for an interesting and informative report here. Being parochial, and I'm just looking at item 5.0, existing service provision for Calderdale Place. There doesn't seem to be anything specific in there in terms of the numbers of providers and units for the key areas of short breaks, respite from council or the voluntary sector, or day opportunities. Is it just something missing from there? Is this correct? What plans do we have to rectify it if this is the case? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. So we did fill in that in from a Calderdale perspective, because it's a strategy across Calderdale, Kirkley's, Wakefield and Barnsley. A couple of the other authorities weren't able to fully complete that information. So there was a discussion about not including it from one local authority's perspective and not including others. So from our perspective, in terms of respite and short breaks, we have 2 units for adults. One is at Glen Home currently and is moving to a new build property at Westgarth, and that has 12 beds, which are for short breaks and also for emergency stays. The CCG also commissions a short break service with St Anne's, Arkenbrook at London Foot, and that has 3 respite placements for people with nursing care needs, and that's where our safe space is also now located. And we have our own in-house provision, Linden Brook, for children and young people with a learning disability as well who require a short break. In terms of day services, we do have a really good provision in Calderdale that spans from in-house specialist day services for people with autism and challenging behaviour or needs that challenge existing services rather than challenging behaviour. And we've got a vibrant market of community-based day services as well. And we've just recommissioned that service to widen it to include cultural and employment opportunities. So to bring in providers that offer kind of theatre and performance opportunities and enhance employment. In terms of housing as well, we perform really well in our lack of dependency on residential care locally in Calderdale because we've got a vibrant supported living and supported accommodation market. So it's not that it's lacking that information from a local perspective, it was just around consistency and that the whole partnership couldn't provide consistent information to input into the strategy document.
That's pleasing. I thought that a number of those things were around, but it's just why it so much surprised me not to see them actually in the report. But thank you for the confirmation.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yep. So Darryl, please, Darryl Thompson.
Yeah, thank you for this. Really interesting. So apologies for my naivety here, being reasonably new in post. I can see that as a provider, Swift are in the action group. Can I just get a sense as to what contribution we made to the development of the strategy? Because I can see all of the CCG and local authority logos on the front. So just a question about our contribution to the development of it.
Yeah, sure. So Tom Jackson sits on the Transforming Care Board, and he's sort of the lead across the region for learning disability services. So no, he's been integral.
Really helpful, yeah. Karen. Thank you. So apologies for that, but that's helpful.
Very good. So this is going to all the health and wellbeing boards, implicated. What happens if one doesn't agree? It's collective sign up of one strategy. It's not piecemeal, is it? So what's the process there? And has there been any challenge from the other boards?
There's not been any challenge to date, Dr. Cleasby, but if there is a challenge, we would bring that back to the board and agree how we address that challenge and then feed back to respective health and wellbeing boards if any change occurred as a result of challenge from an individual board.
Excellent, thank you very much. So are there any other questions or comments? So I guess we're talking about transforming, so that's change from something to something. So when do you see that the job's done? What's gold standard? And when could that be achieved by?
So the strategies from 2021 to 2024. As you know, I don't think we'll ever be done because there's always something to do, isn't there? But I know as a board, the Health and Wellbeing Board has taken a really active interest and championed the local approach for people with a learning disability in Calderdale. So there's lots of underpinning actions. We've got a local employment strategy that's been developed and we're looking at that supported employment offer. We're continually reviewing our housing offer. As I said, we've re-advertised the community based day opportunities and tried to encourage more innovative provision into Calderdale, so around the theatre and arts and employment. And we're forever strengthening and trying to strengthen our self-advocacy and user-led group Lead the Way. There's still a lot of work and acknowledgement that our self-advocacy network now are an ageing group, they've a lot of experience, but in coming years our local action plan is wanting to focus on how we meet with children and young people and that next group of young people who are going to require our support and hopefully less of our services if we can get the right opportunities available for them to lead ordinary and active lives in the community. So this is formally a 3-year strategy. We will have an underpinning local action plan. So hopefully we'll see a lot of progress in that period. But as I say, it's evolving, and I don't ever see there'll be an end to working locally with the learning disability population.
Fantastic, Council. Wonderful summary at the end there. Great. So, is it a formal sign-off from this Health and Wellbeing Board then? Yeah, if this
Yes,
comes to be it's a national programme, isn't it? That's fine. So, are we agreeing then that this is the way forward? Happy to sign off formally. That would be obviously from Tim to sign. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Karen. And I presume you'll be on the forward plan to come back and give us an update on progress for the strategy. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on to our final item, which is assistant pressures and winter. This is an oral report, and it's from Ian, I believe.
Thank you, Stephen.
Initially.
Thank you. So the Health and Wellbeing Board has been interested in how the system is preparing for winter, and I'm kind of going to do a bit of an overview that's based on not my direct role as Director of Adult Services and Wellbeing, but I currently chair the Urgent and Emergency Care Board for the CHT system that obviously includes elements of Kirkley's, but we thought it might be just useful just to kind of give you some assurance. So each organisation has developed and is required to develop its own winter plan, but we recognise that it's also important that we have a system plan to make sure that as partners we are connecting and supporting each other through what is usually a very challenging time. I think it's probably important to note that this winter in particular, I think, will be challenging. We're going into winter in a very challenged position, both in terms of the ongoing pandemic and the emergence of the new variant, and the transmissibility will add pressure and will add some challenges to business continuity for all partners. We also know, and it's well documented, that there are workforce capacity issues across all sectors, and again that will become challenging. We're also coming out of a period where people have had less mixing, so things like other winter pressures and other winter bugs are potentially going to be quite present for us, such as things as flu and any kind of vomiting and diarrhea bugs as well. So I think there's a series of things that we know that generally happen in winter, even without the context of coming through a pandemic. So it is going to be very challenging. On-day demand across all partners is significant, but we have been working on a plan. We have been working through a number of scenarios, and we've also looked at how we might allocate additional funding. So in terms of additional funding that we're putting into the system to kind of boost that capacity and that resilience, the Urgent Emergency Care Board has just identified and allocated £2.3 million across the system, and that includes CHT, the two local authorities, the community providers, support to SWIFT through the a similar process we've been doing around emotional and mental health, but also the voluntary and community sector in terms of being ready to kind of meet the challenge that this winter will bring. We also know that locally we've identified monies from the BCF fund in order to bolster our resilience for winter and creating extra capacity. And we've also received as a system just over 10 million from the ICS to try and look at how we can make our plans for winter. So the plan we've been working on the plan since the summer. We've now got additional funding to back that plan, and we've got a series of priorities. It's been assured and signed off as a resilient plan by NHS England and Improvement, and that was done in October. I do think we've got some real challenges with the transmissibility of the new variant that will add some additional challenges. So whilst we've got a secure, a robust plan, I think what we'll need to constantly review is how are we performing against that plan, and are we able to deal with some of the additional challenges that will come through. I think just to assure the Health and Wellbeing Board, the kind of core priorities that are in the winter plan are about identifying and being proactive at looking at those people at risk of admission, about how we can strengthen our approach to help people stay healthy and well and at home to avoid hospital admission, how we will ensure that we've got good and resilient responses in urgent and emergency care. We've strengthened input into the emergency department around a hub model that is working really well and absorbing a lot of the on-day demand, although on-day demand is higher in ED. You'll start to see some locally based communication and messaging to the wider community about looking after yourself, staying well, taking up vaccinations where you can, if you haven't already taken them, those offers up, but also recognising when the system's under pressure, where best to go to get support and advice. I think that's broadly what I thought I'd share, and I'm happy to take any questions. And I know that a number of partners have been central to developing the winter plan for the system. So if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. Yeah, are there any from members? Or any other perspectives that we would like to share as well? Current pressures, challenges? Deb's just in terms of the numbers in Calderdale, of course that's the big thing, isn't it? What are the current numbers looking like?
Well, it's a bit of a strange position at the moment, Stephen. The case rate's been very steady and very stable in Calderdale for the last couple of weeks. We believe, though, what we are seeing is if you think about it, our data's always old. It's always, and when you've got a variant that spreads incredibly rapidly, that's doubling in 2 days in some parts of the country, when we think about our data, the data that we're looking at around case rates is people that were tested 5 or 6 days ago. They probably came into contact with the virus a week ago, maybe slightly longer than that. But what we have seen is an increase in there's a particular indicator of the Omicron variant that it's not guaranteed it's that variant, but we've seen that increase from 0.2% to 2%. Very quickly. So we believe that we're probably 10 days behind those other parts of the country where the variant is now making up the majority of COVID cases. So we're anticipating a rapid increase in cases. And because of that, as you know, we don't know a lot about this variant. We don't know about the severity of the disease, but what we do know is, and it's absolutely, we're very clear now, it spreads a lot quicker than previous variants. So just the numbers alone mean that from a business continuity perspective, we are going to have our staff are going to be affected, perhaps their children will be affected, and also it's likely that with the sheer numbers we will have people that become seriously ill, unfortunately. So the work that Ian's describing is really, really, really important. But I suppose the other really important thing is the work that Neil is leading on, which is really about scaling up that vaccine programme. So the way I keep thinking about it, if we have 10 days, let's use those 10 days and let's get as many people vaccinated in those 10 days, either the booster, the first or the second dose, all of it offers protection. So let's take that opportunity and get as many people vaccinated as possible.
Thank you, Debs. And there literally are thousands of local appointments available. So obviously urging all partners to encourage staff and the public to come forward as quickly as possible. Darryl Thompson, please.
Yeah, so just to echo, even though we're a largely mental health provider, the impact will be significant. And I absolutely agree with that kind of 10-day kind of, I'm trying to think of it. It feels like a calm before a storm at the moment. So our staff absences are present, but they're not shooting up yet. But we are anticipating that they will. We are preparing for that, and we're taking a particular approach to our business continuity planning at the moment, just to get us in as good a place as possible. But this is equally in the context of continuing high demand and continuing level of acuity for people who come into contact with us. So yeah, it's Christmas is looking like it will be interesting, and so we are equally reviewing what our emergency response will need to be as an organisation to see us over the period.
Thank you, Darryl. Any final comments regarding system pressures in winter? It's going to be very interesting and challenging. Okay. So thank you very much indeed, Ian, and for Deb's contributions as well there. I think that concludes our business for today. Apologies for the slight hiccup with the some of the agenda items, but I hope it was okay for everybody. And